In August of 2000, two people were gunned down in an apartment in Marin County, California. Neighbors heard the gunshots but didn't see anything that could identify the killer. Once investigators tracked down a suspect, they learned that the victims were only two of the people murdered in a convoluted plan for a small cult to take over the Mormon Church and win a battle with Satan. This is Monsters. This story starts like so many stories of cult leaders in a devoutly Mormon family. Glenn Taylor Helzer, who went by Taylor, was born on July 26, 1970 in Lansing, Michigan. He was the oldest of three children born to Jerry and Karma Helzer. He had two younger siblings, a sister Heather and a brother Justin. Taylor was noticed at an early age for his ability to memorize and recite scripture. He was outgoing and popular, where his brother Justin was quiet and described as living in his brother's shadow. Karma would end up spending their entire lives showering Taylor with attention while barely noticing Justin. At some point as teenagers, the Helzer children went to live with their maternal grandfather, who people said was even more fanatical regarding his religion. He told people that he spent hours talking to Jesus in his front yard. Taylor really seemed to look up to his grandfather, which might have something to do with his actions later in life. A psychiatrist would later say that he believed that Taylor started experiencing unusual and inappropriate ideas as early as 14. He believed he was receiving messages, but didn't know if the messages were from God or Satan. The family had moved around a bit, from Michigan to Texas, then to Georgia before finally settling down in Pacheco, California, just northeast of San Francisco. No matter what school Taylor was in, he was always popular. Despite not playing sports or being part of any extracurricular activities, every student knew him. When he graduated from Ignacio Valley High School, he joined the National Guard in Texas. He quickly became concerned by the drinking and swearing from the other men in his unit and began preaching to them. It rubbed some soldiers the wrong way, but overall his time in the service was unremarkable. After his discharge from the National Guard, Taylor went on a mission to Brazil. It was 1990 when Taylor arrived in the country, and the other young adults on the mission with him described him as energetic and passionate. Missionaries work in pairs, and Taylor ended up partnering up with a young man named Jonathan Taylor. They quickly became friends as they were both overly interested in scripture and religious doctrine. Jonathan said Taylor had trouble sleeping and would stay up all night studying scripture and writing in his journal. It was about 3.5 months into their time together that Jonathan noticed an abrupt change in his friend's demeanor. He began interpreting the scriptures in a way that Jonathan didn't agree with. He also started teaching those beliefs to others instead of following the strict guidelines given to them by the church. Taylor seemed to become obsessed with the end times and believing technology would all be destroyed, leaving humans to survive in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where different factions were led by warrior priests. Taylor started bringing his ideas to the mission president, but he did not share in the young man's beliefs. Because of that, Taylor decided that the president wasn't a true spiritual leader. When Taylor returned home from the mission, he had begun believing the entire Mormon Church was either covering up the truth, as determined by Taylor, or they didn't know the truth and shouldn't be in a leadership position. He reconnected with a woman named Anne who he had gone to high school with, and he was interested in dating her, but she wasn't Mormon. He ended up talking her into joining the church. While they were dating, Taylor's beliefs became wilder, and he started pulling his brother Justin in with him. Due to the belief that the world was going to become a wasteland, they started practicing survival techniques. Taylor and Anne got married in 1993 while Justin was away on a mission. Anne would later say that Justin was hurt that his brother wouldn't involve him in his wedding, but it didn't seem to end the admiration he had for his older brother. The newlyweds began marriage counseling shortly after their honeymoon. Anne said Taylor was controlling and refused to admit when he was wrong, which makes sense. When you believe that you're getting special messages about your religion, you kind of have to be the type of person that doesn't accept when people tell you you're wrong. Taylor and Ann argued constantly about everything, including what happened in the bedroom. Taylor had been sheltered growing up, and as an adult he wanted to emulate what he saw in pornography, which Ann wasn't interested in. They eventually had 2 daughters, which led to more arguments about how to raise them. It got to the point where Ann began to trust Justin with their children more than their own father. She said Taylor was self-absorbed and didn't consider anyone but himself. Justin was attentive and caring to the girls, often visiting them to read and play. After getting married, Ann's uncle helped Taylor get a job working as a stockbroker for Morgan Stanley in Walnut Creek, just south of Pacheco. Taylor's sister already worked there as a secretary. Taylor excelled at the job due to his outgoing personality. Like many people who go on to become cult leaders, Taylor was able to draw people in, make them comfortable, and convince them to take action. Talking people into handing over their money is a big part of being a cult leader, so working as a stockbroker was a natural fit. Over the next few years, he developed a client list of a few hundred people, managing between thousands and millions of dollars each. In 1996, though, Taylor's manager noticed a change in his employee. Taylor stopped cutting his hair and was grooming himself less. He also started smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, and staying out late at nightclubs. He continued to perform well, but his manager worried about the sudden change. The change was due to Taylor's desire to test out what sinning was like. His behavior devolved into taking drugs and staying out for days at a time. Taylor told a family friend around that time that the Mormon Church had betrayed him. He said that he had gone on missions and settled down and gotten married because that was what the church told him he was meant for, but they were wrong. In June of 1996, Taylor and Ann divorced, and Ann said she didn't only lose her husband. Justin was so influenced by Taylor that he followed the same path as his older brother. In the mid-90s, Taylor's mother Karma had gone through a church program called Impact. There are many similar programs, always named something like Impact, Harmony, Vision, or something that will make it seem introspective. They're supposed to make you able to deal with obstacles in your life, but they do it through intense emotional manipulation that can often do more harm than good. The person leading the program is usually treated as all-powerful and convinces the attendees that the abuse is going to help them. Karma convinced the rest of her family to attend the program, but Taylor didn't use it as a way to learn how to overcome obstacles. He used it to learn techniques to manipulate people. After completing the program, he saw himself as someone who should be leading Impact. After that, Taylor and Justin rented a house together. They lived with Taylor's girlfriend, Carrie Furman, who he had started dating prior to his divorce from Ann, plus 2 roommates, Olivia Embry and Brandon Davids. By then, Taylor was not attending church regularly, and he didn't seem to care that Carrie wasn't Mormon, though he did make her go through the Impact program. It wasn't long before Taylor was looking for a way to make money without working for it, yet another common behavior of a cult leader. He confided in a friend that he was going to fake mental illness to get disability. He tried to convince the friend that the welfare system was broken and that what he was going to do would ultimately help fix it, but they didn't seem to believe him. Taylor started going to psychiatrist appointments where he would rant about anything that made him seem crazy. He would intentionally go without bathing or shaving for days before his appointments. In August of 1998, Taylor was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and was approved for disability. That gave him time to plan his future actions, which increasingly involved the end times. While living in the house, someone had the idea to send pictures of Carrie to Playboy. Some stories say it was her own idea, and others say it was Taylor's idea. She was self-conscious about her breasts and wanted a breast enlargement, so she borrowed half the money from Taylor's father and saved the other half on her own. After the surgery, she posed for pictures that were sent to Playboy, and they were impressed. They sent out a photographer, and she went on to model regularly, becoming Playmate of the Month in September of 2000. She used the pseudonym Carissa Fair in the magazine. She and Taylor got into the rave scene and started using ecstasy together. At the same time, Taylor created rules for the house and expected everyone who lived there to follow them. He was constantly the one who had to be in control of everyone else. Despite bringing in money through disability and selling drugs, Taylor was the only person in the house that didn't pay rent. He told his roommates that he needed to save his money to fund his upcoming plans. They started as a goal to launch his own self-help program like Impact, but they eventually grew into something far more disturbing. Eventually, Taylor developed what he called the 12 Principles of Magic. They were 1. I am already perfect and therefore can do nothing wrong. 2. There is no such thing as right and wrong. 3. I am all-powerful and therefore the creator of and accountable for everything that occurs in my life. 4. Life is always right. I embrace all of my results. 5. All of my results I have created to learn from at some level. 6. I know nothing. I believe nothing. I simply perceive without fear. 7. It is of no concern to me how accurate or inaccurate my perceptions are, and therefore I am always right. 8. Unconditional fearless love is the most powerful force in the universe. 9. Spirit knows. 10. I gain total control by losing all control. 11. Life is such a precious gift, and when I give back to life, immediately life gives more back to me, and therefore I am forever in its debt. What goes around comes around. 12. There is a higher power than me, and that is my Savior, Jesus Christ, the Son of my Father. Taylor's plan to start a self-help program shifted into something he called Transform America. That was a plan to begin opening self-help centers across the country where he could teach people how to be happy, but he would need startup capital. Taylor wanted Justin and Carrie to be part of the core of the group. He would preach to them constantly about the plan, and if they didn't understand or didn't agree, he would become irate. Justin went along with it much more easily. He did everything Taylor did. He had even joined the National Guard after Taylor. Carrie was more skeptical. Taylor's first idea to make money for Transform America was to open a brothel of sorts. He wanted it to be a place where rich men meet beautiful women. Well, how original. It would be called the Feline Club, and his plan was to go into Mexico and bring back young girls to use as sex slaves. So basically, sex trafficking. He dreamt of appealing to high-end customers by having someone walk around with a platter of free drugs. That plan grew into a scheme to blackmail his former employer, Morgan Stanley. He was going to have the girls pose as sandwich delivery workers to deliver lunches to the rich yuppie stockbrokers, and while there, they would get to know the employees. Then they would eventually invite them over for sex. Taylor would take pictures of the stockbrokers engaging in sex with the girls, who would of course be underage. He would then have the girls sue Morgan Stanley and get them to settle for $50 million. In another story, it was $20 million. Where he got those numbers is unknown. It seems that most of what came out of Taylor was pulled directly from his ass. Taylor, being the nice guy that he was, would give some of the money to the stockbrokers so they wouldn't become so depressed they ended their lives. He and Carrie did go to Mexico, but they only bought some Rohypnol, aka the date rape drug. The sex slave/blackmail plan never got off the ground. He moved on to attempting to manufacture meth in the garage of the house they rented. Carrie would later say she was upset when she arrived home one day and she discovered the new operation, but like the brothel, it never came to fruition. He had another plan to start a club, again for rich men, that he described as a porno fantasy island. What exactly that meant is unknown. Then there was the plan to go shoot out the windows of a specific fast food chain, causing its stock prices to drop. Buy stock when it was low and then sell it after the stigma from the shooting died down and the stock went back up. Taylor thought of himself as some genius who was on a higher level than everyone else, but his money-making schemes show that wasn't even close to being true. Like, how many fast food restaurants could you possibly do that to in order to make enough money for it to be worth it? It was stupid. By 1999, Carrie was tired of Taylor's schemes and she wanted to move on with her modeling career. Taylor was losing trust in Carrie and had started distancing himself, so it wasn't long before the couple split up and Carrie moved to Los Angeles. Don Godman was born in Amador County in the mountains east of San Francisco. Growing up, her father suffered from chronic asthma, which caused all of the focus to be on him instead of the kids. She was emancipated at 17 years old and soon after married her boyfriend Patrick. They ended up having a son together. It wasn't long before the couple was divorced and Dawn was raising her son on her own. She went to Sacramento Community College and became a nurse to support herself and her little boy. The stress of her situation caused her to become addicted to meth, and she eventually lost custody of her son. After suffering from homelessness and mental health issues, Dawn joined the Mormon Church and moved in with her grandmother in Martinez, just west of Pacheco. By the end of the 90s, Dawn was a full member of the church and she had gained visitation of her son. Then she joined a singles group in Walnut Creek, where Taylor and Justin were still living at the time. The group hosted weekly game nights, and in May of 1999, the game was a live murder mystery. Taylor and Justin also attended the murder mystery, and that was when they met Dawn. Taylor immediately picked up on Dawn's vulnerabilities and successfully exploited them. She became enamored with Taylor, but she didn't become part of his inner circle right away. Taylor had other people he was trying to get to follow him without question, but they weren't working out. Taylor would give people loyalty tests, asking things like, "Would you rob this store for me?" or "Would you deliver a package for me?" If the person didn't say yes, he would claim they weren't on his level yet and get angry. Being on his level apparently meant that you no longer had any independent thought. You did whatever Taylor said to do. Like all of his other followers, Taylor told Dawn she needed to go to the Impact program, and that meant she was one step closer to being on Taylor's level. Though Taylor never came out and said he was a prophet, he told people that he was communicating with God. Dawn would later say that she believed that Taylor and Jesus Christ were brothers. Taylor was still promoting his Transform America plan, which now involved going to small towns across the country and pitching the idea to the community. They would allow the leaders of the town to attend the program for free, and when everyone else saw how much happier they were, they would also want to join. In exchange, the municipality would donate 1% of their tax revenue to the organization. It was a lofty and frankly convoluted plan. To think that any city or town would give an unknown man with no track record of success in the self-help industry any amount of their tax revenue was a perfect example of the delusion Taylor lived under. Even being delusional, Taylor knew he needed more money to start his new enterprise. He talked to Dawn as if Transform America was already an established nonprofit, which it wasn't. In early 2000, Taylor felt he could trust Dawn enough to let her into his inner circle. He took her to the grounds of a Mormon temple and told her he could tell her the truth there because Satan and his minions couldn't hear them there. He explained that he needed what he called a core of 3 people to be the new prophets of God. He and Justin were 2, and he wanted her to be the 3rd. He also told her about the plan he labeled Brazil. That plan involved them adopting orphaned children from Brazil, bringing them back to the U.S. and training them to become assassins. Their mission would be to kidnap the 12 apostles of the Mormon Church, the church's president, and his 2 counselors. The victims would be forced to tell the media that they had been kidnapped by the U.S. government, which would create chaos throughout the U.S. Taylor would present himself as a unifying force in the Mormon community and would be appointed the new president of the church. His counselors would be Justin and Dawn. They would appoint 12 new apostles, and the 15 kidnapped victims would be killed. Taylor explained that God said the killings were necessary in order to save the world. Apparently, Dawn believed that. Taylor had no shortage of plans, but he didn't have the money to pull any of them off. That's when he decided to extort the money he needed from an older couple who used to be his clients at Morgan Stanley. Justin rented a 3-bedroom house having only himself on the lease, but Taylor and Dawn moved in. They used the house as a base of operations for their plan and began going by fake names. Taylor was Jordan, Justin was Jason, and Dawn was Sky. They began calling themselves the Children of Thunder. The plan including having one person open a bank account for them to funnel funds into. Then they would kidnap multiple people and empty their investment portfolios into that account. The people they kidnapped would be killed, as well as the person who opened the account. Taylor had met that person in April of 2000. Selena Bishop had grown up in Marin County and moved to Pennsylvania when she was a teenager. After she graduated, she moved back to California and was followed by her mother 3 years later. Selena was working and going to school when she met Taylor at a rave, though he introduced himself as Jordan. Like many people, especially the ladies, Selena was immediately taken with the charismatic stranger. She knew he sold ecstasy at raves and assumed he made a living selling drugs. She didn't seem to care, and the couple began seeing each other. She quickly fell in love with Taylor, not knowing that he didn't feel the same way. He was only using her. Taylor ended up telling Selena that he was going to inherit a lot of money from his great-uncle and that he wanted to hide it from his ex-wife. He explained that he wanted her to open 5 different bank accounts that he was going to put the money into, $125,000 total. And once the transaction was complete, she could keep $5,000 from each account. Now, some of the details of this story are vague. It was clearly described that Taylor had told Selena the plan was to open 5 bank accounts, but only a single bank account is described later in the case. It's likely that the plan changed, but I couldn't find anything explaining that change. In May of 2000, Justin went to a Hogan's sporting goods store and purchased a Beretta 92, a weapon he had experience using as an MP in the National Guard. Justin also bought various ammo, some of which would be used in an AK-47 as well as shotgun shells, but those weapons never appear in this story. When he handed the clerk his ID, it still had his old address on it, so that's where the gun was registered. In June, Dawn went to a Sears department store and purchased a Craftsman reciprocating saw as well as extra blades. She also purchased 2 Stunmaster stun guns off of eBay. On July 2nd, Dawn purchased 3 ski masks, 3 pairs of ski gloves, and some weights from Copeland's sporting goods store. The weights would not be used to exercise. On July 10th, each of the 3 members of the Children of Thunder adopted a dog from the Contra Costa County Animal Services Center. Taylor adopted a Border Collie, Justin adopted an Australian Shepherd, and Dawn adopted a Rottweiler. Part of Taylor's plan was to cut up the victims' bodies and feed them to dogs, but they ended up realizing it wasn't a realistic option. They bought meat and soup bones and fed them to the dogs, but they weren't able to eat enough, and it was clear they wouldn't be able to consume an entire human body. 2 of the dogs were released in the wild, but they kept the Rottweiler. Taylor went through his client records to carefully choose a target. He found an elderly couple who didn't have close neighbors and planned the attack for Sunday, ensuring the best chance they would be home. They brought the gun, the tasers, handcuffs, leg irons, a small blowtorch, and the Rohypnol. On the morning of July 30th, 2000, the 3 members of the Children of Thunder prayed and then declared war on Satan. Dawn visited a friend named Deborah McClanahan, who was loyal to Taylor and gave her instructions for their alibi. She was to go to a movie theater in Pittsburgh, which is a small city east of Pacheco, near the mouth of the Sacramento River. She was to buy 4 tickets to the movie X-Men, watch the movie, and then go to a restaurant and order 4 meals. She was instructed to keep the receipts. Deborah didn't know about the plan to rob and kill anyone. She assumed Taylor was involved in a drug deal. In the early evening, the Children of Thunder put their plan into motion, but it got off to a slow start. Taylor had actually chosen a man named Bob White as the prime target since he had the largest portfolio amongst his prior clients and lived in a secluded area. They went to his house, but he was out of town at the time, so they had to move on to the next potential targets on their list. Ivan and Annette Steinman. Ivan and Annette had both been born in the Midwest, but hadn't met there. Both of their families had moved to California in the 1930s, and they met there in the 40s. They married in 1945 and went on to have 2 daughters, Nancy and Judy. They raised their family in a house they built in Pico Rivera, just southeast of Los Angeles. Ivan was a supervisor in the credit card division of Chevron gas stations, and Annette seemed to also work for the company, but it's not clear what position she held. They were a typical family, enjoying family time and outdoor activities. Eventually, Ivan was transferred to the Northern California division of Chevron, and the couple with their younger daughter settled in Concord, a city that made up the area with Pacheco and Walnut Creek. When Ivan retired, he started working as a real estate agent until Annette also retired and they began investing their money at Morgan Stanley, where Taylor became their financial advisor. They ended up getting to know Taylor very well. The Helzers were big into river rafting, and the Steinmans went with them on a trip one year. On July 30th, Ivan and Annette had dinner with some friends and then returned home a little after 3 p.m. At 8 p.m., Taylor and Justin parked their car, a black Saturn, down the street from the Steinmans' house. They walked up to the front door and knocked. There were quite a few people who noticed the two that day. A woman, who was coincidentally a neighbor of Deborah McClanahan, was driving down that very street as Taylor and Justin were walking to the house from the car. She saw the men were both wearing suits and thought they might be Mormon missionaries until she noticed that one was smoking and they both had long hair pulled back into ponytails. The man who lived across the street from the Steinmans saw the pair and also assumed they were missionaries, so he backed away from the window so he could pretend to not be home if they came knocking. Dawn had driven Taylor's Nissan pickup truck and parked it at a different location near the Steinman residence. As she was sitting in the truck smoking, a woman who lived nearby named Rise Bradfield Minder was waiting for a friend to arrive when she noticed Dawn in the truck. When her friend arrived, they both talked about the suspicious woman, suggesting she might be the lookout for some illegal activity. They contemplated calling the police, but it wasn't long before a white van pulled up next to the truck. She could tell the driver had a ponytail, but that was all she could make out from the silhouette. When the van pulled away, Rise heard the woman call out, quote, "I'm right behind you," but then she got out of the truck. She walked right up to Rise and her friend and told them that she knew they had been watching her. She explained that her friend had purchased some drugs and she was just the backup. Rise asked her why she was associating with shady people, and Dawn answered, quote, "It was a last resort." Then Dawn walked back to the pickup and drove away. It's unknown what happened in the house. Not long after Taylor and Justin arrived, Ivan and Annette's daughter Nancy called. Annette answered the phone and was unusually short with her daughter. She explained that they had company and hung up. Eventually, Taylor and Justin were able to get the couple into the back of their own white van and take them from the house. The crew returned to their rented house on Saddlewood Court on the outskirts of Concord. They brazenly shuffled the Steinmans into their house while their neighbor Kay Shimon was watching through a window. She assumed the couple was Taylor's grandparents. Once inside, Taylor sat them down and ranted at them at gunpoint. Then the group separated the two and asked them questions about their regular habits and their financial accounts. When they reunited the couple, they reviewed their answers to see if they were lying, but found the answers to match. Taylor told the Steinmans that he was in legal trouble and needed a lot of money to get out of the country. He explained that he was going to have them write him some checks, then he would handcuff them to a bed at an undisclosed location. After he had the money and was safe, he would call the police and give them the location. Then he put a mattress in the living room and told them to go to sleep. Justin stayed in the living room with them as a guard. The following morning, Dawn called the office of Morgan Stanley and pretended to be Annette. She said they had a medical emergency and needed to liquidate all of their assets. She was able to confirm personal information, but the agent said the woman on the phone sounded nervous. After a while, Dawn told the man she needed to catch a plane and told him to make the transfer. Though suspicious, he did as he was told and the assets began being liquidated. It would take a few days for all of the funds to be deposited into the Steinmans' money market account, which they were able to write checks from. While they waited, Taylor took Ivan to a phone booth where he made calls to cancel a few appointments and leave messages for their daughters. That way people wouldn't report them missing, at least not right away. Then Taylor gave both of the captives a large amount of Rohypnol, which he thought would make them more compliant. All it did was make them too drowsy to function. He was able to get Ivan to sign some checks, but Annette was unable to stay alert enough to sign. At that point, they had Dawn try to forge Annette's signature. When they realized how well Dawn had done with the forgery, the Children of Thunder decided that the Steinmans were no longer needed. They dragged both of them into the bathroom, and Justin later said he wanted to give them an overdose of Rohypnol, which he believed would be the most painless. Taylor had other plans, and like everything else in life, no matter what his brother told him to do, Justin did it. First, he said they were going to suffocate the couple, Taylor with Annette and Justin with Ivan, but the Steinmans struggled too much. They got some plastic and tried to use that, but also failed. Then they started beating the couple's heads against the floor. The medical examiner would later say that he believed that Ivan had a heart attack during the assault, but Annette continued to cling to life. Taylor lifted the woman up and laid her over the side of the tub, then stabbed her in both lungs. When that didn't work, he slit her throat and then pushed her face down into the blood so she would drown. Both Ivan and Annette Steinman were finally dead. While Taylor and Justin got to work dismembering the bodies, Dawn changed her clothes and drove to a bank 50 miles or 80 kilometers away to deposit one $10,000 check to see if her forgery would pass the test. The Helzer brothers placed the body parts into plastic bags and set them on a blue tarp in the hallway. The following day, Taylor took his truck to an auto parts store to have a tow hitch installed, while Dawn went to the bank where Selena had opened an account and tried to deposit 2 large checks signed by the Steinmans. Well, signed by Ivan and Dawn. She didn't just walk into the bank, though. She went in using a wheelchair and gave them a story about how Selena needed emergency surgery and the Steinmans were going to pay for it. She gave the bank manager 2 checks, one for $67,000 and the other for $33,000. The bank manager said she needed to confirm the transaction with the Steinmans and tried calling the number on the checks, but obviously got no answer. Then she tried to call the stockbroker from the money market account, but he said he needed Ivan and Annette's social security numbers in order to give her any details. Dawn told the bank manager that she would get their social security numbers in return, and then she wheeled herself out the front door. The problem was that the front door didn't lead directly to the parking lot. You had to take stairs down to the parking lot if you used the front door, so she should have used the elevator instead. The bank manager found the whole thing very suspicious and ended up putting a hold on the checks. In the evening on August 1st, Dawn and Justin took the truck to a rental agency and rented a small boat. The following day, Taylor met Selena at his house because she believed they were going on a camping trip to Yosemite, but that was only a ruse. It would explain Selena's absence for a few days, so she also wasn't reported missing right away. It was later discovered that Taylor would show some apprehension about murdering Selena. He wrote himself a note saying that he thought she was becoming a better person and that maybe he shouldn't kill her. Of course, in the note he explained that anyone would become a better person just by being around him. Cult leaders are always so humble. It's unclear why Taylor killed Selena when he had, though. There was still a hold on the checks totaling $100,000, so she wasn't able to withdraw the money for him. Still, on August 2nd, he had her meet him at the house and she was eventually lured into the bathroom. Justin was supposed to sneak up behind her and hit her on the head with a hammer, but she never fully turned her back to him. Later, in the living room, Taylor gave everyone glasses of wine and he had spiked Selena's with Rohypnol, but she saw something floating in the glass so she didn't drink it. Finally, Taylor offered to give Selena a back massage, and while she was laying on the floor with her head turned away from Justin, he bludgeoned her with the hammer. She was hit 6 times in total. They moved her to the floor in the kitchen so she wouldn't bleed onto the carpet, but as they were getting ready for the next step, she started moving. Taylor hit her 3 more times with the hammer. Taylor and Justin rolled her up in plastic and carried her into the bathroom. Over the tub, Taylor slit Selena's throat, and the medical examiner believed that was what finally killed her. Just like the Steinmans, Selena's body was dismembered and placed into plastic bags. Initially, those were supposed to be the only victims, whoever they had robbed and whoever had opened the bank account. That plan didn't take into account Taylor's paranoia, though. Selena's mother, Jenny Valerian, had seen him with Selena despite his efforts to avoid that. It also didn't help that Selena had told him that her mother was a private investigator, something that wasn't true. Taylor knew that Jenny was staying in Selena's apartment while they were supposed to be in Yosemite, so he decided to go there and eliminate another witness. Selena had previously given Taylor his own key. Jenny had been out with a friend named James Gamble that evening, and after having a few drinks, he thought it wasn't a good idea to drive back home to Yountville, about an hour north. Jenny offered to let him crash at her daughter's apartment with her, and they both went back there and fell asleep. Taylor drove to Selena's apartment while Dawn was in the passenger seat, wiping fingerprints off of every bullet and reloading them into the magazine. In the early morning hours of August 3rd, neighbors in the area were woken up by 6 to 8 loud bangs. One neighbor immediately called the police to report the sounds. Selena rented her apartment from a couple who lived in the house above it, and one of them went down to the apartment to see what happened. After getting no response, they slowly opened the door and saw a man with blood on his chest. He ran back to his house and also dialed 911. When officers arrived, nobody had seen anything. One person heard footsteps running away and another heard a car drive off. They found both Jenny and James face up on the bed with multiple gunshot wounds. They were both declared dead at the scene. Not only did Taylor and his followers dismember the remains of 3 of their victims, they also removed their teeth so they would be harder to identify. Later in the day on the 3rd, the 3 towed the boat to the Sacramento River and loaded the bags of remains into it. With the remains were also the weights that had been purchased earlier in July. They took the boat all over the river and dropped the bags into the water at various locations. In the following days, the group returned the boat and ditched the Steinmans' van in a rough part of Oakland with the windows rolled down and the keys in the ignition. They also had to try and clean the bloodstains out of the carpet and the kitchen. Ivan and Annette's daughters hadn't heard from them in days, so their older daughter Nancy went to their house on August 3rd. She noticed their van was gone and that there had been food left out on the table for long enough to start molding. Then she found that their cats had no food or water, and one of them had clearly been locked in a bathroom for days. She knew that her parents wouldn't go away without telling her, and they definitely wouldn't have neglected their cats. She called the police and reported them missing. By then, investigators working the murder of Jenny Valerian and James Gamble had tried to find Selena and failed, so she too was listed as missing. For all of the work that the group did, which Taylor believed would cover their tracks, it didn't take long for police to connect Taylor and Justin to the crimes. While the disappearance of Ivan and Annette was being investigated, a detective found a note on a desk that said, quote, "Check with Taylor." It's unknown why or when it was written, but when investigators looked into the Steinmans' background, they learned that Taylor Helzer had been a financial advisor for the couple years earlier. On August 6th, the Steinmans' van was located exactly where it had been left, though the condition made it clear it had been stolen. It seemed that the killers had rolled down the windows and left the keys in it, hoping it would be stolen by someone else, but it wasn't. Forensics examiners would find fingerprints in the van belonging to all 3 of the cult members. While searching for Selena, detectives got a warrant for her cell phone records and found calls coming from a number linked to Taylor. When they dug into his background more, they found that he owned a white Nissan pickup which Selena's landlord had seen while she was moving into the apartment below. They also found that his brother had recently purchased a 9mm handgun which matched the caliber Jenny and James were shot with. Selena's friends kept saying that she was dating a man named Jordan, but it was clear that that person was actually Taylor Helzer. When they showed pictures of Taylor to her friends, they confirmed he was who they knew as Jordan. The detective investigating the double homicide got a warrant to search the house where Taylor, Justin, and Dawn had been living in the early morning hours of August 7th. That search took place only a few hours later at 6 a.m. After knocking on the door with no answer, the SWAT team broke the door down and stormed the house. All 3 members of the Children of Thunder were inside, and Justin and Dawn were quickly taken into custody, but Taylor managed to escape. He jumped out of his bedroom window, hopped a fence, and ran. A canine unit was sent after him, and he was quickly apprehended. Because the gun that Justin owned matched the murders, he was the main suspect. One detective asked to speak with Taylor privately, and she took him out to a patrol car, sat him in the front passenger seat, and they sat there and talked for some time. Suddenly, he flew out the window and took off running again. He made it to the house of a woman named Mary Mazzocchi, and as she stepped outside, he grabbed her and forced her back into the house. He grabbed a knife and held it to her face, demanding her car keys. She told him her car was in the shop and pointed to the phone book, which was open to the car rental section. He made her give him some of her husband's clothes, and then he cut off his ponytail. He tried to take her as a hostage, but as they got out the front door, she pulled away, got back inside, and locked the door. Taylor ran away. It turned out that Mary's son had heard the commotion downstairs and called 911. Officers saw Taylor running from the house and were able to take him into custody. Again. In the group's house, detectives found bloodstains and documents regarding work with Morgan Stanley. They found a Rolodex with the information from Taylor's previous clients, and they would eventually find the card from the Rolodex that had the Steinmans' information in a briefcase. It was believed to be what they brought the gun, stun guns, handcuffs, and Rohypnol to their house in. They found extensive notes Taylor had written about all of his various schemes. The feline club, the blackmail of stockbrokers. Taylor's brain was always running wild, and he was a prolific note-taker. They found receipts for a number of the items used in their crimes, including the boat rental. That went along with notes about the Sacramento River Delta. There was also a note that had Selena's address written on it. Then they found VHS tapes where someone had recorded news reports about the murders of Jenny and James and the disappearance of Selena, or the disappearance of the Steinmans, cases that had not been linked yet. Not only had Deborah McClanahan been enlisted to create an alibi for Taylor, Justin, and Dawn, but Taylor had also convinced her to let him keep a safe in her apartment. When investigators discovered it, inside they found a checkbook and credit cards belonging to the Steinmans, their social security cards, as well as a Beretta 9mm handgun with the serial number filed off. It was only a day before people started finding black bags floating in the Sacramento River. By August 9th, all 9 bags had been located and were announced to contain the dismembered remains of Ivan Steinman, Annette Steinman, and Selena Bishop. While in jail, Taylor began pretending to not remember anything that happened. He was trying to get himself into a position to mount an insanity defense while the authorities were building a case against him, Justin, and Dawn that included conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and robbery. His plan took a major blow when Deborah testified at his preliminary hearing that he had previously told her that he was, quote, legally crazy, and if he was ever caught, he would never be held responsible for his actions. That's not something a quote-unquote legally crazy person would be cognizant of. She would also testify about the instructions to provide the group an alibi, showing that the crimes were premeditated. The Helzers encountered another setback when Dawn agreed to a plea bargain in exchange for her testimony against the brothers. Taylor's lawyer attempted to get a plea deal for her client, but the prosecution refused. They knew Taylor was the mastermind of the entire crime spree, and they knew they could convict him. He ended up pleading guilty to 18 felony counts and was sentenced to death. Justin changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity and went to trial. The first phase of his trial was to determine if he was guilty of the charges against him, which the jurors easily found to be the case. The second phase was to determine his sanity at the time of the crime. The defense tried to claim that Justin was so influenced by his older brother that he wasn't acting of his own accord. That didn't matter, just like the defense's claim that Justin hadn't planned any of the crimes and was only doing what his brother had asked. In the end, Justin had committed the crimes he was charged with, and he knew they were wrong when he carried them out. He was found guilty of all charges and also sentenced to death. In 2010, Justin attempted to kill himself by jamming pens into his eye sockets. He survived the attempt but was left blinded. On April 14, 2013, he successfully ended his own life by hanging himself in his cell with a bedsheet. He was 41 years old. Taylor Helzer is still on death row at San Quentin State Prison. His execution date has not been determined. Dawn Godman was denied parole in 2025 and will not be eligible again until 2028. It's an oxymoron to have someone claim that innocent people need to die in order to make the world a better place. The stories of one person claiming to be a prophet who speaks to God and that God is telling them to kill are too common, and people need to see them for what they truly are: monsters who are selfishly willing to sacrifice innocent lives for their own benefit. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.